Hey guys, it's Kevin again. This is my review for Halt and Catch Fire, Season 1, Episode 3, High Plans Hardware. Now, unfortunately, this episode for me, weakest episode of the season. I thought that it was a good episode. It wasn't bad, but the show, I gotta say guys, it's starting to lose me. Even though we're on Episode 3, it is starting to lose me. It wasn't as interesting this episode. One of the storylines revolved around a bird. A bird. It was stupid. It wasn't as bad as, Turn Season 1, Episode 4. It wasn't as bad as that. However, I do feel like this show could be starting to lose me, and I really hope they improve it. And, I feel bad for them, because it started off really good, and now it's not going to be good. And, if they continue to make episodes like this episode, I don't know if I'll continue to watch the show, because I wasn't as into this episode tonight. Last night's episode. So, let's just get into this episode, because I overall just thought this was an okay episode. So, the main plot, I guess, in this episode, but we'll first talk about, Gorden and Cameron. They had a huge thing in this episode. Cameron walks into her office to a vacuum cleaner switching on, goes back to work in the wee hours of the morning, and Joe listens to music and watches the synthesizer light on his stereo. Now, Joe is up front in the room and explains the 28-pound computer is not portable, it's legible. He tells that they are not making a carburetor, he holds a briefcase, and tells by the end of the year, Cardiff Electric will be releasing a computer with 2 disk drives weighing no more than 15 pounds. The room erupts in loud talk saying it can't happen. And, they say Randy could have worked on this, but he was fired. So Joe pulls Gorden aside and asks if these are the guys he chose. And Joe says their attitude sucks, and Gorden says these are the only engineers left and microprocessor experience, so this is what they have. So Cameron walks around the office, picking up stuff at the other desks of other people that are fired, and Cameron looks up her office in the storage area with stuff and goes to work. Taping again on the keys with her Walkman on. She's frustrated and starts again. She types not good enough, and the engineers are trying to figure out where to put the heat sink. Now, Gorden says they need to add speed without adding heat, and the engineers debate what to call the workroom. We'll get to more of this when we get to, Gorden, but basically, Cameron rubs her head in frustration. She looks around, turns to the, pilfered items, and dials the phone. She gets Joe's secretary, who asks if it's Cameron, and she hangs up. Joe and John talk to Aaron about IBM trying to take them down, and Aaron tells them to come clean, because if he partners with them, he'll audit their books and install a guy, Roger, to keep an eye on them. So Joe offers a weekly call instead, and Aaron asks about their client base, and John says it's a whole new client base, and John gets sassy, and they can't go door to door or sell at country fairs. Now, Joe's very annoyed at this, and by the way, I still do really like Joe's character. I'm not saying that, I'm just saying it wasn't as into this episode. Cameron comes in to get a soda from the machine. He talks to her, but she has no contact, grabs her soda, flips him off, and goes. Gorden is aggravated, and Brian says he'll order pizza. He realizes Cameron stole his soda. Okay. So Joe meets with Nathan and says they need an investor. Nathan says John wasn't wrong, and John brings some drinks to the table and sits. Nathan says that Joe is the vision guy and John is the money guy, who will make all the financial decisions on this project. John and Joe look at each other, and John says it's agreed, and Nathan says good. He tells them no more backstage bullshit and says he's going to set them up with Louise Lutherford, a local who has enough money to get them through this. Nathan says she's a handful, and Joe asks if she has a background in. The waiter interrupts, and Nathan and Joe order steaks, and Joe does the same. Cameron works on her whiteboard. She writes and erases and again and grunts in frustration. Joe calls her on her phone, and she asks what he wants. He says he's checking in, and he says she's a talented coder, but she's also a bottleneck, and she tells him he should be a motivational speaker, and he asks if he needs to come down there, and she says no and hangs up, kind of sounded like he wanted to. So yeah, that was interesting, I guess. But Cameron dances around the and then the next scene is very, very strange. I was just like, what is going on here? Cameron's dancing around the office with Walkman on, and then pulls it off as she sees a light in John's office, wanders in, looks around, he's there, and startles her. She turns and says hi. He asks if she is wearing Lloyd's shoes. He tells her he had to fire him in the morning, and she says she's wearing a dead man's shoes. Kicks him off, says she only came in to switch his light since she heard money is tight. and he asks the difference between go to and go sub. She explains, and he says it makes no sense to him. She says it's hard in the beginning. He sits and says if it wasn't for her friend Joe, he would be home right now. He asks if Joe's different. She stares blankly. He chuckles and puts on his glasses, tells her to take care of the shoes, scoops them up on the way out. Joe tells her she can work here as late as she likes, but can't live here. That was interesting, actually. That was definitely pretty interesting. So, then we see that Cameron plays with a pencil sharpener and sulks. She looks through shavings on her desk, then groans, starts throwing stuff in the trash can, looks at her notes, sees an envelope with her paycheck. She smiles, goes to the bank, comes out with a huge wad of cash in her hand, and she goes to buy a stacks of food. Then Judy, Ajax, and another kid approach her and ask if she has money or a car. They mock her for having a job, and they call her a sellout, and Judy says they're going, taggling, but they are going to pound some vodka, but they are short on money, and Judy asks if she has a better idea, and she says, yeah, and they follow. This was one of the only scenes in the episode that I really enjoyed. Yeah, so it was one of the only scenes I really enjoyed. So, yeah, unfortunately, as I said, this episode was disappointing, so it was one of the only few scenes I enjoyed this episode. So Joe cracks a joke about Figaro, and says she'll give them $10 million for 8% of the project, and John says that's aggressive. Joe starts to walk out, and then a bell rings for dinner, captures his arm, walks him to the table, and Cameron is with the three miscreants, watches them smoke, drink, and dance wildly. She refuses the alcohol, but dances around a little, then collapses on the bed. Ajax asks what her job is about, and basically, she says software. He says he thinks his dad does something like that. He calls for Grimace and tells him to tip the maid. He does, and Cameron finally caves in and swigs some vodka. Ajax does some ink on her shoulder, and Joe is bored and aggravated while John tells a dirty joke. And basically, Cameron looks at the ink the guy did on her arm, freaks out, but then looks at it some more, grabs a lipstick, starts writing codes on the mirror, erases and does it again, strikes through it and starts over, while the other kids rage on. Then we get the weirdest scene of the entire episode. This was just like, what the fuck happened here? Joe goes after this guy, Travis. He says he doesn't know anything about Brandy. Joe comes over, pulls his hand over Travis, runs his hand up his chest, turns to his face, and he kisses Travis. No, I am not a fan of this. Seriously, how many more shows are going to keep doing this? Penny Dreadful is the only show that did it well. Penny Dreadful is the only show that I think is doing it well. This is the stupidest thing ever. Why the fuck are you turning Joe gay? That is so stupid. That is the dumbest thing that this show has done. I'm not, again, I have no problem with gay people. I have no problem with them at all. But that was so stupid. That was such a stupid twist, and I hated that. I fucking hated that. I hated that so much. Because he kisses Travis full in the mouth, they start making out, and then he has sex with him, basically. So, then we see John eats dessert, lemon meringue pie, when Travis comes back with liquor, and Louise asks what took so long and where the brandy is. He says, not brandy, it's 2 Coldsworth, 1912. Joe comes behind looking pretty smug. He sits and says he and Travis decided not to pour it. And Louise looks between the two of them, and immediately knows what's what when Travis stares at Joe longingly. And he asks, what did you do? And he says they will talk tomorrow and drives off. So yeah, Travis now likes Joe, and this is not good at all, because they basically just ruined the show for me. That ruined the episode for me. I was just like, no, that is not cool. That is not cool at all. So Cameron goes to Joe's apartment, comes in uninvited, and she tells him the address calculation code is too long and takes up too many bytes. She says she needs an address book that's like a map. He asks why she's there, and she says she's stuck. She pulls up her shirt and goes into his bedroom. Overall, I did not like the main plot of this episode. I understand why they did it. I like that they're trying to get us to care more for Joe and Cameron, but I was not really a fan of this plot at all. I thought the Joe thing was the stupidest thing this show has done so far. Him kissing Travis, really? Again, I have no problem with gay people. In fact, if you are gay, then I'm glad you're doing it. You're putting yourself out there. That's great. But he did not seem like that kind of character. He seemed like Don Draper, and now he's gonna be like a gay Don Draper. No, AMC does not need gay characters. AMC does not do gay characters, and I would rather them not, because I don't think they could do that very well, and that was a terrible, terrible way of doing it. I was not a fan of that at all. Let's go to Gorden and Donna. Gorden and Donna's plot was actually pretty interesting this episode, even though it revolved around a bird. I thought their plot was 10 times more interesting than Cameron and Joe. I just thought Cameron and Joe was not interesting. Gordon looks at a dying bird while his daughters fret, and Donna asks if it's breathing, and she asks if there's anything he can do, and he says the only vet may help, and the neighbor offers Gordon a ride to work since his car's in the shop, and they lament the bird's death to come, and the neighbor says, let go, let God. He tells Gordon not to sweat it. So Gordon talks to one of the employees and is being around what he's really trying to say. Brandy bursts in and says he won't wait around to be fired, or him or Joe, and the guy in his office panics, having no idea what he was called to be laid off, and Brandy tells him he looks forward to their PJ project crashing and burning, and Gordon signs it wordlessly. So then what ends up happening is Donna tells her boss they will have to recall 10,000 unties because of keyboard issues. He asks how soon can he tell Mark, and she says Monday or Tuesday. He asks about her parents, and she says they are good. She asks about Martine, and he says she's frustrated that Texas Instruments don't always mean staying in Texas. He says he can't believe they're here and are a long way from high school. He says they all knew she was just making time in marching band, weighing on something better to come. Honestly, this scene was just really boring. I didn't like the scene at all. It was boring. Gordon works. Another engineer tells him to let them go to buy some Goodwill. Gordon does and wishes them a good night. Brian stays, and they talk about the here issue. And, basically, then what happens is Donna's parents show up with gifts for the kids. She bought a headstone for the kids that says Bowser and plays Choplin's funeral march. Her mom says the Japanese never rest on innovation. And basically, she's kind of telling Donna that she needs to start letting Gordon do things, and her mom then asks about T.I. and says she hasn't seen Hunt in the club since he moved back. She says she hopes to see his foreign wife at July 4th, and Donna says she's Canadian. She says he likely won't be in Dallas long and will probably be sent overseas since management likes him. Her mom asks, you can imagine Donna pauses doing dishes to do that. So Gordon and Brian burn the midnight oil working on the design and discuss moving cables to other parts. Brian says he wants to work, and it's a hell of a concept. He says he needs to execute it. It will be tough sledding. He says they need to sit down with Joe and tell him it can't be done. And Brian says he'll be his wingman, but Gordon says he can tell him. Gordon then tells Donna he's sorry he missed her mom, and she says he's not. She says the girls missed the bird and barely ate, and he says it may not have been the best night for kitchen, but she's working on the report for Hunt. She looks at his layout. She says it's interesting, and he asks her to take a look, but she says she has to finish the report. Donna glanced over and tells him to move the interrupt controller and the partially rammed chips, then rotate the DMA controllers to make room. And honestly, this plot is this also ruined the show for me. Gordon has whiteboarded his wife's overlapping design concept and says he thinks they can make it work by splitting the motherboard and layering it on top of itself and run the jumpers vertically. Brian asks who will mass produce a new layout for them. Brian asks what he's thinking. Gordon says he wasn't thinking that far ahead, says it's a killer idea, but they only have 3 months. They can't reinvent the wheel. Tells Gordon it's his call. Gordon tells the engineers to forget it and says he'll tell Joe he erases his incredible idea. So Donna hustles to Hunt's office with a report. He opens the door long enough to snatch her apart from her hand and to shut the door in her face. And then what ends up happening is that Brian talks to Gordon. This is a huge scene. This scene I really liked. Brian's talking to Gordon on their drive home about a card game, but Gordon stays silent. He tells Brian he should just join the game. Brian's distracted and they get into a wreck. His gremlin is trash. He asks if Gordon is alright, and he nods. He says they can't see because they don't trim the branches. Gordon tells Brian that he's fired, gets out of the car, walks away from the wreck, because Brian just got him into that car crash. And then this scene just, wow. Gordon walks up the house, hears the bird chirping, walks inside, and Donna is very upset. She says, you're bleeding. Shushes her, tells her to listen, and says the bird's alive. She says animal control said the best thing to do is to kill it. It really is in that situation. And he says he's had a bad day. He's going to kiss his girls, wash up, and is not going back out there. Donna goes to the shed, gets the shovel, looks down at the still chirping bird, grimaces, and looks at her husband staying in the kitchen. Whacks the bird, and she kills the bird. So that's the end of the episode. And honestly, that ruined the show for me as well, because one of the things I loved about the show was that it wasn't your typical married couple. It was wasn't your typical, broken marriage. It was more them trying to fix it, and now it seems like she just kind of she's trying to end it now, so I'm not happy about this overall. This episode was very disappointing. I did not like this episode. The Joe being gay ruined the show for me. I think him kissing that guy is just like, what the fuck is going on? Cameron, not very interesting either. Gordon and Donna, while I liked it, they ruined that plot for me of the show, which I really liked. I really was enjoying the whole, them trying to actually make it as this couple that has problems, and now it seems like they're not going to make it. But overall, this episode, I really did not enjoy it. I'll say that right now. If they keep making episodes like this one, I'm not going to enjoy the show. I'm sorry, guys. I'm not going to enjoy the show. And honestly, if I stop watching the show, it's not going to hurt me that much because I already have like 3 shows to watch. So that's in my review. Hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you guys in my next video, which will be another classic movie review. So I'll see you guys for that.